Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Innovation Leadership Essentials. This is one in a series of webinars where we connect for 30 minutes to bring to life the challenges we see in the market and what to do about them. During today's session, Raphael Vitón, Excellence Global Transformation Lead, will engage with Aaron Proyet, a former SVP and Chief Innovation Officer at Transamerica, which is part of Aegon, or as we would say in Holland, Aegon. They'll discuss failures, victories, and insights from the trenches that will help you implement change more easily and separate the essential from the important when it comes to delivering better innovation outcomes. And over to you, Raph.
Thanks, Barbie. And Barbie, you know how to say Aegon the way the Netherlands, the way they say it in the Netherlands, because that's where you're from, right?
Absolutely, that's where I'm from, born and raised.
Nice. Well, and today you're in Key Biscayne, though. And Aaron, you are out in Colorado. I'm in the Midwest and the burbs of Chicago, and we've got folks dialed in already, I can see, from all over. Big thank you to our marketing team in Buenos Aires at the excellent headquarters. And I know if you're not live today, but you're watching this as a recording, I know folks from all over Spain, Barcelona, Europe, Australia wind up tuning in, so big hello to you all as well. And to our friends who are, I think it's already tomorrow in Asia, a big hello to you. So this is going to be fun, Aaron. The next 30, 40 minutes is all about you and your journey.
Well, we've had some fun preparing for it, too, so it's been fun to rehash the old war stories. And we'll share some of them here today.
It has been, and we're gonna get to besides the credentials here, the positions that you had. We're gonna hopefully by the end of this webinar, we will have explained how you became one of the 24 most creative people in insurance, as so named by the industry itself.
All right, that's still a bit of a mystery to me, but maybe we'll unlock the secret. I'm not sure how that happened.
So I do appreciate you being on to share some of the first-hand stories and the learning, the hindsight, and how valuable that can be to folks who are at different stages of their journey, of course. We're not here to try and suggest that anything that we talk about is the way or the only way to go about improving innovation outcomes, but it is definitely, you know, based on your experience and my experience and the shared experience together, what stuff has worked to help make it easier. And in many cases, we learned the hard way what would help make it easier for Transamerica and the community of folks that were doing it there. And in some ways, universally what makes it harder, and I think all of us can learn from that. And if you'll permit me, before I turn it over to you, I'm going to do a little bit of a storytelling about how I remember it and the way I choose to tell the story and remember it. And it is the story of a big old stuffy insurance company becoming a better big old stuffy insurance company, for sure, in a highly regulated, sleepy industry, you know, where the 150-year-old parent company, Aegon, eventually, I think back in 2010, tells the 100-year-old conglomerate of 16 to 25 entities in the U.S. that it had rolled up already. And, you know, it tells that group of 25 companies that, hey, brand yourselves now as Transamerica in the U.S. so we can have one consolidated brand. We can consolidate different functions that will help us downsize, you know, experience many economies of scale. And we're going to reap the benefits of kind of milking the cash cow of the United States companies until what? Until they dry up? Until there's nothing left to milk out of them, anyway.
Right, there was prospects of global investments that seemed to be more attractive markets that Aegon wanted to be in. That's right.
And the idea then of how these, you know, in the U.S. anyway, we're just talking about the 25 different companies that have been mashed all together, not necessarily integrated really well, different brands and whatnot, going to become just Transamerica, and knowing that there's all these silos, there's these executives, that are armored up with their defensive routines. There's the organizational defensive routines as well that are set up to protect the king and the power structures that had come about over the 100-year time frame. And I think everything probably would have gone in that path of maintaining the status quo and drive the money out to the Netherlands, except for the visionary CEO from your business unit at the time, a multi-billion-dollar business unit, thousands of employees, Scott Hamm, who said, "No, we're not going to just dry up here and kind of stay stationary. We're going to instead outpace the industry. We're going to grow. We're going to be innovative. We're going to be creative. We're going to change. We're going to transform this place to show the world and the parent company that we can be a part of growth and change and a part of the future and contribute in a very significant way." And at that time, the CEO, Scott Hamm, and Chief Strategy Officer, President Ed Walker, appoint you, Aaron, as the Chief Innovation Officer to help make this dream come true and the vision a reality. And Aaron, at the time, 2010, 2011 timeframe or so, you're a double math degree, self-proclaimed introvert, a process-driven, you love physics, you're a ringleader in very many ways. We're going to lead the charge, right? You're going to lead the charge.
That's right.
And
yeah.
And part of the story, I'll give away the ending, right now, and it'll come about through your storytelling of victories and failures and whatnot, was how you brought this competency to bear, this creative competency. You built the innovation engine inside of Transamerica. What came to be eventually and still is there is the Marketing Innovation Lab for Transamerica US, and it was quite a hero's journey for many people, many of those executives that we talked about before, to really in some ways surprise themselves with how far they could go with the vertical adaptive learning, and how surprised you were in terms of how your essentials, what you thought was essential at the beginning, had some counterintuitive twists and switches along the way. Did I nail it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think it was late 2011, I was handed a strategy roadmap, which mentioned innovation and was given the direction, go, innovate, create this innovation engine. What I dreamed I would be doing at that moment was creating innovation lab spaces, finding better ways to brainstorming, buying a whole bunch of beanbag chairs, and starting to ideate. What kind of unfolded over the coming year, 2 years, 3 years after that was very different than what I had initially imagined. We had to learn. We had to learn a lot, not only about who we were as a company, but about what we were capable of and industry best practices for innovating. And as much as I thought I knew some of those pieces, I was continually surprised. And the piece I was surprised, and this probably isn't surprising coming from the introverted math guy that you described, but the piece I was most surprised by was the people element of what it really truly takes to be an innovative company. There probably is a way to approach innovation with brute force and to throw money at innovation and create an innovation lab which is separate from the business, but it isn't the elegant path to go down. And we tried to take the true elegant path, and in many respects had many successes along the way, as you described. And a lot of people grew in their careers and grew in their perspectives as we went through that journey. So the people element was the most surprising. That's definitely something we're going to talk a lot about today.
And I remember that time, right? We started working together in 2011. I was the president of Maddox Douglas and helping lead the engagement team with you all. And the idea of that elegant path certainly rubbed against the comfort zone of yourself and many of the execs, but everybody was kind of like, hey, we're going to try it. We're going to do this. We're going to align. We're going to build a case for change, and we're going to figure this out. And everybody was super committed to it in the face of, and and if you'll permit, I'm gonna rifle through. I was gonna say, in the face of what we all know makes innovation harder, and so in a command and control environment that's chosen this more elegant path of recognizing that, hey, we have to do this with people while we're building the muscles around the technical competencies. There are certain things that make this harder, and some of these we learned on the back end, but some of these are, I think we can all agree, in the beginning. And I'm going to do this Pecha Kucha style. And Aaron, you can describe for the audience what that is.
Yeah, it's a Japanese approach, I believe, to PowerPoint presentations in which the speaker speaks and the audience reads and is left to interpret what is on the slide in front of them. And we'll go pretty quickly through these slides so we can get to the meat of the story. Yeah,
and I'm going to go faster than Pecha Kucha style. I'm going to go Pikachu style, which is like 5 seconds. I don't know if that's formal. Anyway, so the idea of change is hard is something we say, something we've heard ourselves say, we hear lots of people say. But part of the question is we're going to tease out a little bit here is it hard? Is hard an attribute of innovation, or are there things that make it harder for us and things that make it easier for us? And let's look at it. Things that definitely make it harder for us is when it's not prioritized. I love this. This is just a funny picture of child being eaten by a camel. Do you save your child first, or do you take a photo first? In this case, the parent chose to take a picture. So priorities matter. Innovation's harder when you treat it like an event versus a lifestyle choice. And part of the idea there of, is it lip service we're giving it? Is it a way of being, or is it some niche functional skill that a few people in the organization have, and then the company benefits from it? So how do you look at it? What's your perspective on that, right? It's harder when you don't create the space for creativity, collaboration, engagement, and all those other elements that are a part of a culture of innovation to flourish, as evidenced by this fantastic quote here. It's harder when you don't ask for help. The idea that leaders, especially successful leaders, are supposed to know how to do this, and God forbid they say they don't know how to do it and they ask for help. What does that say about them? How does that, that's part of the comfort zone thing is, I'm used to being the one with the answers. I'm used to being the one that has the solutions and the strategies and just tells people what to do, where for the more complex challenges of innovation and culture change, command and control is very much an interior innovation strategy. So we ask for help. It's harder when you don't use the expert tools and processes. It's just infinitely harder if you're just winging it and hoping good things come. It's harder when you wait longer than you have to. Have you seen this meme on the internet, Aaron? The not yet, not yet, not yet. Now, oh wait, too late. And then, as we segue into, is it hard or isn't it? Aaron, can you squat 300 pounds? Is squatting 300 pounds hard for you?
Absolutely.
It's hard for me. I can't imagine 300 pounds. At one point in my life, maybe close, but nowhere, I can't, but it's not hard for her. So where our instinct, unconscious answer might be squatting is 300 pounds is definitely hard. Well, no, it's hard for me and it's hard for you. It's not hard for her, so it's not an attribute of the 300 pounds. It's an attribute of, it's a relative comparison of our ability to take on the challenge, right, the weight of 300 pounds, compared to our ability to respond, our leg muscle capability. So it's always a comparison of those two things. And the idea of, depending on how developed, in this case, our leg muscles are, it either makes it harder for us or easier for us. So I'm going to, very consciously and with very deliberate language, make sure we don't fall victim to creating a self-fulfilling prophecy that kind of gives away and surrenders to everyone the fact that change is hard, innovation's hard, and we're doomed to just suffering forever because it's hard, as opposed to recognizing kind of this relationship. And yeah, and in the context of innovation itself, the idea of the two things we're comparing is the complexity and the market dynamics, VUCA, if you will, with the innovation leadership capabilities and muscle mastery around the attributes that we say help achieve and deal with complexity and market dynamics: agility, curiosity, creativity, collaboration, risk-taking, and the technical competency. So there's this, again, certain things and our relationship with building focusing on deliberate practice that helps build these muscles, that help us be more equipped and ready to deal with VUCA in the industry and the pace of change that our industry and the competitive environment is creating for us. How ready are we, and how hard it is or easy for us is dependent on how well we've been training those muscles. And that's part of the main context that you'll hear us say in a lot of these webinars, and you and I are very much aligned on this, the fact that innovation, leadership, and transformation is a learned capability. They're muscle groups that everybody has. It's not some unique domain of the wildly creative idea monkeys. We all have these capabilities. Curiosity can be done by everybody and practiced by everyone. How do we develop and train these? And think about it in the context of where most companies, most corporate growth strategies are dependent on how well these muscles perform under stress, right? Going from a current level to a next level, so that the company can make that bridge, that transition to a new level of performance across many different dimensions. And often we look at it like, it's shifting from the old success formula, plan A, if you will, to a new success formula, B, C, D, E, F, whatever that new success formula is, a digitization strategy, a new distribution channel emphasis, new product services, business models, etc. And the idea that if you wait too long, eventually what served you well, plan A, winds up being even harder. And the idea that eventually if you wait too long, that turns into the, oh crap, we waited too long strategy, right? The upside down A. If you aren't working on those muscles, and the current level, next level looks like this a lot of times in a word cloud. Aaron, I know you can relate to this, the words inside of this word cloud back in the 2011 timeframe when we were kind of creating the case for change and inventorying the current state of the culture and seeing verbatim what the baseline was, right, of the current level, and comparing that to the next level version and the vision that you and the CEO and the Chief Strategy Officer and the rest of the leadership team had kind of said, that's where we need to be, and this is where we're at. Now, how are we going to get there? What do we need to do to get there? So the rest of the time is really you helping talk through what you learned as far as the big three essentials that you see now would make it easier.
Yeah, the stark contrast here between these two word bubbles really gets me. We saw this, and we went through an exercise where we talked about the current state, and a lot of those words that you're seeing on the left hand of your screen here were thrown back up at us. This company will not succeed because we are siloed, we are static, we are non-committal, this is just the flavor of the month, that sort of thing. And the vision, like you said, is in such stark contrast to where we currently were that I wish I had known the lessons of what it took to take an organization from that current level to the next level. But it really requires learning, and it requires adaptation to get there. And I didn't appreciate that as much. And I wish that I had known three things I'm going to share with you here today. I wish I had known those from the outset. In hindsight, I put together the pattern.
I'm going to interrupt you just to make sure the audience can hear these three essentials, but you're breaking up just a little bit. I don't know if what you can do about that or not, but just wanted to let you know.
Okay. Is this a little bit better?
I hope so. I think so.
Okay.
Let's keep going.
I am hearing a bit of an echo, and I'm not sure where that's coming from.
Yeah, all of a sudden the technology kind of started
going up. So these are the three lessons that I wish I'd known when I was tapped to lead this initiative in late 2011. The initiative was about becoming a more innovative company and changing the culture of 6,000 plus employees. And we'll go into some detail on each of these. First, we need to demystify innovation for our employees. At its best, Innovation is nebulous. It's unknown and challenging. That's at its best, and some people rise to that challenge. But for many, innovation is likely a very scary endeavor and maybe even threatening to what they know. So we have to demystify it and be able to make sense out of it. And are we hearing me okay? I see you making a face.
Oh, yeah, it's good. I forget that you can see me.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yeah, no, it's I hear you, but you're almost like you're going in and out of auto-tune. You know, that when it sounds like bandwidth is getting squeezed or something.
Yeah, I don't know what to do about that.
Keep going. It's all right. For the most part, I hear you pretty well.
Let me try this. Maybe this will be a little bit better. Secondly, you know, we need to be successful. You need to identify and plan for resources, competencies, and expert tools and processes up front. You know, you're trying to move the business from a certain place, and it's a place of ambiguity, to a new place, which is another place of ambiguity. And you may not know the path to get there, and that's between those two word bubbles, more or less. But it's best if you do have a plan to navigate from one word cloud to the other, one place of ambiguity to the next, to improve your odds of success as you're going through that. And we'll talk about that in more detail. Third, innovation is easier when you invite and empower everyone to be an innovation leader. And this is a big shift from the command and control environment where the highest paid person's opinion, you know, shifting from that environment where that's what matters to one in which anyone and everyone has the rationale, the know-how, and the support to be innovative. And that's really what it's about, to empower. And we'll talk about the strategy to get there. So going back to demystification, what I found was demystification, a declaration from the top that innovation is what we're going to do is a very exciting thing for the organization. We saw evidence of that everywhere we looked in Transamerica. There was this buzz in the hall and at the Java bars. And actually, as you described, because Transamerica and Aegon's ecosystem was so complex, this organization wasn't particularly adept at communicating its strategy, really kind of after the fact communications and everything that happened. Oh, we just bought a new company, or we just dissolved a company. It was very difficult for people to understand the whole of what was going on at Transamerica and Aegon. The innovation strategy was maybe a ray of light in that sea of complexity and scariness that they were experiencing. Something for them to go home and talk about at the dinner table. Hey, listen to what my company's doing now, and maybe even latch onto to make their own personal jobs more fulfilling. What surprised me the most, however, was that innovation transcended into something nearly mystical. And it was aspirational, yet flexible, so it allowed anyone to use the word to justify almost any action. And so there was a flip side to that, so allow me to use a physics analogy here. The analogy is that every particle in this universe has something which is known as an antiparticle of equal mass and opposite charge, which can annihilate that particle at any time. So it turns out these notions of flexibility and the aspirational nature of innovation also had antiparticles. Because innovation is flexible and you can use it to describe almost any situation, it was also very inconsistently understood by the people who we wanted to have a consistent understanding. And because it was an aspirational trait of the organization to be innovative, it was also unattainable. So you're never going to be there. You're always going to want to be more innovative, and there's always going to be more to fix. So if an employee latched on to this inconsistently understood and unattainable theme of innovation, they could quickly dismiss innovation as the next flavor of the month, or something that's not going to work here, something Transamerica wouldn't be capable of doing. So it took me and my team nearly 18 months of deep learning and thinking to make sense of what we were truly being asked to do when we talked about innovation. The rationale we came up with had to be, so the antidote to demystify it had to be relatable and accessible to every employee what it is that we're trying to do. So we came up with the idea that innovation is this core competency of the organization for dealing with the everyday aggressive pace of change that the organization faced. And we wanted to get our employees a set of tools and resources for dealing with change and being able to adapt. And we had to show them exactly what that was going to look like. Another analogy that's not physics related, but you can't ask people to let go of a trapeze without showing them the new trapeze that they have to grab onto, which leads me to the next point on the next slide. We had to have a great plan to identify and plan for resources, competencies, and expert tools and processes up front. Again, to reiterate the trapeze analogy, when you're asking people and a culture to change, you have to give them something to grab onto. Articulation of the strategy and buzzwords simply was not enough to create that change. So it's not sufficient to say our status quo doesn't cut it, right? That simply isn't enough. And it's not even sufficient to say, here's how we're going to behave now, right? You can't just ask people to behave differently, because when you do that, whether it's an innovation department or if it's a set of frontline employees, without a structure that's in place to support the new behaviors and reinforce those new behaviors, they will revert back to old bad habits, unfortunately, which feel safe and are maybe even rewarded. So, like you said, to bow to the king was a bad habit that was rewarded at Transamerica. And so to wait for direction, that sometimes was safer than to take a risk and try to do something new, despite the fact that that direction may, in fact, never come. So this is where having a toolkit of resources was very valuable. We had to help everyone from the managers to the executives at the top to the frontline employees understand how to thrive in a new environment that we were creating. So these resources, competencies, the toolkit we were putting to, thank you for that. The toolkit couldn't just be surface level stuff like process maps like you see here or innovation rooms. It kind of has to be full-on Jedi training, but this is where we started. For me, a process map such as what we have in front of you was what I was initially drawn to when we signed on with the consultancies which helped us along the way. Maddox Douglas produced this mine-to-market process for us, which reduced innovation down to a series of very concrete steps that was designed to extract insight from the marketplace, from our customers, designed to involve employees and executives and gain buy-in, give us a story to tell, and ultimately produce an innovation portfolio or an innovation strategy that would have better odds of success than if we were not to use the process. So this gave us a comfort level or a de-risking of innovation, which was very valuable for our initial efforts. And it also gave my team, which we called the Innovation Center, something very concrete to work on. It was the institutionalization of this process to improve the organization's know-how. So a great starting point is to have some sort of process, to have some sort of plan in place, like I said, from moving from one ambiguous area to the next. And this was it for us. This was the starting point.
Yeah, and it's and Aaron, if I can, like the idea of how this process as a model helps everybody start to practice building those muscles of very skilled and expert divergence and convergence, which is how the diamonds in the process even show, and which is mirrors many of the best practice innovation processes out there, whether it's the design thinking, the agile, the lean, like the elements of what's on this slide. Back to here, the mind-to-market process and the multi-year kind of process from a technical asset development innovation strategy standpoint that we were working on to help create visibility of the highest economic value segments with the highest economic value insights so that we could focus innovation on a very specific area to create value for the organization, as opposed to, hey, innovation everywhere, anything, blue sky, versus methodical, very thoughtful, very specific to create value for the organization. And what the two projects that we worked on specifically within the strategy piece, one for the for the public end consumer, one for the distribution channel, was a reason for the human beings to start practicing together while you're creating these assets, right? It is the best area of if it was a wrestling mat, this was the place where we could all get together and really start wrestling with new language, new concepts, new perspectives, and bring many perspectives together from a divergent standpoint, so that then we could converge into, well, what's going to be most helpful and most useful, without kind of short-circuiting or arm wrestling over who's got who outranks who to make the decisions. Now it was going to be driven by real market data and insight and healthy debate, not toxic debate, all along the way. And that's kind of what tees up the idea monkey ringleader metaphor behind the book that Mike Maddock and I wrote, that we used a lot, that language, as a simple way to dig into the reliability mindsets and the eventuality mindsets, these operational mindsets that exist inside of the company, and learning how to flex them when we needed them right. Make sense? You with me?
Absolutely. Yeah, this did help on everything that you just said. I loved seeing executives dig into the artifacts that this process produced. It gave them new data points that they could talk about in their circles, and it left kind of their whim. We were able to deprioritize their whim, which was great. That all said, you just alluded to this, not every process or discipline, like we just showed, has the same strengths, right? Some have some pretty stark limitations as well. So when we put that first process in place, that was just that. It was a starting point. It was first in a series of business processes that we need to install. Innovation needs to be iterative, as is evidenced by the circle that's shown on the graph here. These lenses and models through which we look at innovation, these different processes, are necessary. To use another physics analogy, you can't know reality. The only thing you can know is the models through which you view reality. And so we had to have these different pieces in place. And over the course of the several years that followed that initial program, we installed lean startup programs, mine-to-market programs, new market research techniques, new advanced analytic techniques, new creativity techniques such as innovation games, different collaboration frameworks such as innovation ambassador programs, and the list goes on and on and on. And that was exciting because and actually in retrospect, for me, that was probably the most exciting period of building an innovation engine inside of a corporation, was installing all of the different elements that were required. It took years. There's no silver bullet here that allows you to know all this stuff or hire the right people who know all of this stuff, because what we put into place, and this is where Axialent actually lended kind of a hand. It helped us a great deal to understand programmatically what are the highest leverage opportunities for our organization. We had to develop a muscle of empathy to understand what the organization was struggling with, and then find the best solutions to help us with those struggles. So that finally leads us to the culture of innovation piece. And I've tried to downplay this a little bit, but ultimately what we were tasked to do was build a culture of innovation, collaboration, and trust. Initially, there was a team of 3 people who set out to accomplish this for an organization of 6,000 to 10,000, depending on what day you counted. I always said that a team of 3 could not change a culture of 6,000, but 200 people could. In order to create a sustainable culture of innovation, which was the end game here, we had to invite, enlist, and ultimately empower people not just to innovate, but to lead innovation. We had to build new structures which encouraged and rewarded any and every employee to take some risks, to be an innovation leader, from the CEO to human resources, to talent development, to our front lines, to our marketing folks, to our operational folks. Everyone had to have access to tools which they could relate to and which made sense to them. And a lot of this was about following a rigorous change management program. Again, to kind of go back to the beginning of the story, when I was tapped to do this, I didn't know that's what I was signing up for. Again, I thought we were ordering beanbag chairs and new technology, and instead it was a change management program, and it really tested me to become a better leader. Ultimately, success was about employees that could lead the charge, and in late 2015, we were able to declare success. The original set of people sat around a table and said, you know what? We have done the things on the right side of this slide, and we have created a sustainable culture where innovation is now relatable, it's accessible, so everyone understands the context of innovation in the broader strategy. It's everywhere, so where we decided to start with, like you said, a very focused process and a very small segment of so that we could develop a language to talk about success stories. Eventually, innovation was everywhere, and everyone felt the need and the rationale, and had the resources for how to do it. And being sustainable is the bottom side. Employees who were enlisted into the program now can lead the charge. And we had joked at the outset of the program, how would we know when we had created the sustainable culture? And it's when the 3 people who went at the outset of the program who were tasked with doing this were no longer needed. And we got to that point where, we had the culture holding us accountable. And there were people who were speaking the same language that we had learned to speak, and were starting to use the tools that we had learned to institutionalize, and were becoming expert in them themselves. And we were no longer the experts in everything. And it was just this great transformation to have achieved. And none of it happens on its own. So like we were talking about, all that muscle needed to be built, and needed to be built by people who were willing to step out and lead that change. Personally, my own transformation process is, I began to live by the mantra, if I'm not thinking about leading, quite simply, I'm not leading. And so I had to do that by example all the time, and continually change and continually push myself. And we got to that point finally where we had those building blocks in place.
And those building blocks, and I think you're treating yourself like an innovation project all of your own, right? Your own transformation to shift from thinking that it's all about this model here is how Axelent uses to describe the 3 dimensions of success that we're really focusing on all the time as a leader, whether we know it or not, and especially as a leader, leading change and transformation and innovation, is the ability to overachieve on all 3 of these. The idea that we come into it thinking that it's about performance, growth, profitability, and yes, it is about it is about the results and the achievement, but it's also about, and necessary, that it's about the relationships and the trust and the respect, the community of people working together under conditions that help them be themselves more and work together better, so that they can achieve more together, right? The results go up when there's better teamwork and better relationships. And obviously that comes from being able to work on, at the same time, work on ourselves and recognize if we're bringing all of our energy and all of ourselves and all of our creativity and intelligence and courage and all of that energy to work. Am I engaged? And do I feel good being a part of this community, being a part of this work, being a part of the purpose of the company? Or do I not feel good? Is it toxic? And do I check myself at the door before I go to work? And that just lowers performance. And obviously every company talks about engagement and measures engagement. So the idea of how these 3 things work together, and like you described, the idea of the leader now recognizing that I need to be mindful and conscious of all 3 of these things at all times while we're living through the tension of our current level on our way to the next level. And that is a lifestyle choice of how to be more Jedi at all 3 of those things, as opposed to just command and controlling the it, which doesn't, in the end, it breaks down. The relationships aren't there, the trust isn't there, and therefore the creativity and the satisfaction and whatnot isn't there either at the individual level. So all of that working together is kind of how I saw you and the team and the culture grow in that regard. And I'll keep going here so we can get to questions. The idea of, hearkening back to, is it hard, or is that just something that we say? And from a relative standpoint, relative to the choice and commitment that we make towards that next level shift, away from these dilemmas that have us stuck, and moving towards a balanced, we call a balanced portfolio approach, where we're actually able to see and talk about, what's future, what's core, what's new to us, but not new to the market. We know the customers want. How can we experiment quickly? How can we talk about and measure innovation in a way that we manage our own risk and our own investments in innovation? How do we shift from this known fixed mindset to a growth mindset? And how do we get through that hierarchical, patriarchal expression of power to one that is a much more open, Keegan and Leahy call it a deliberately developmental organization, where we're more self-led, mutual learning is kind of encouraged, and that's what's happening more all the time. Is change hard? It is, relative to our preference to hang on to old success formulas. This is a wonderful exercise that senior leaders go through on their own personal journey, like you did, for change, where they actually start to be more conscious of their preference for doing things the old way, because it served them well for so long. So it's not unusual that they hang on to it, but when they're more conscious of it, then they can start to choose whether, as these examples show, the yellow one, I prefer to come up with and present my own solutions and defend my own position and my own turf, rather than take the time to actually inquire with real curiosity to actually arrive at the best solution. And that is the opposite of what innovation, what an innovative environment is all about. And to see leaders start to actually identify and relate and overcome and work on these challenges within their own MO is really powerful. Makes it easier when they're working on that. When the senior leaders are working on it, modeling and demonstrating, providing that social proof, worth more than much of the dollar investments. The social investments in social proof help move the organization along a lot faster. And this as well, organizational contradictions exist inside of companies, usually going from those two word clouds. The idea that you might declare that it's time to think innovatively, but yet the conditions still exist inside the organization that have people thinking in a very different way, that the environment is such that it's better for me to not put myself in a position of being blamed and punished, because that's what's going to happen in this company. CEO or somebody says, challenge with humility. Let's really get into healthy debate and be there to learn, but at the same time, there's a culture of knowing that if I speak up and challenge, somebody's going to think I'm disruptive, I'm a troublemaker. People are going to not think I don't play well with others, and that might put me at risk. I'm not going to do that. Hey, let's be more collaborative. Everybody be more collaborative. But at the same time, I'm being evaluated on how well I do individually, and I'm going to be incented on my individual goals. So I can't really be as collaborative because that doesn't have the effect on me that matters. So the culture is full of these organizational contradictions that have to be worked on, and we get to a place, and this storytelling today hopefully gets us to a place of, in all the context of the things that need to be done. And there's a lot of things that are critically important that we get right when we're managing innovation, leading innovation, creating a culture of innovation. Critical, important things to get right, which is across the top. The process, the tools, the infrastructure that you talked about, the strategy, the assets, the governance processes, and the measurement, the metrics. Critical to get those right, and to be expert, world-class at those. You need to be great at those. That's important. But what's essential, meaning if you don't get the essential right, it doesn't matter how good the important stuff is the people and innovation leadership and the culture aspects of it, and how those two things drive the gears forward or backwards more so than the top three. So separating the essential from the important is really what we're getting to today. I hope that is a good payoff for the stories that we've been through. We got 15 minutes for questions. From a people standpoint, the idea of, again, simplifying it just so that we can talk about it, simplifying the stories you told, Aaron, the idea of how we help leaders be more ready by seeing more, opening their aperture of awareness and understanding so that they can operate from an awareness level with greater complexity, so that they can be more skilled at the relational aspects of collaborating better. And at the same time, using those durable innovation assets, using kind of the personal strength and fulfillment and integrity of their own transformation process as an individual and collectively at the same time to feel stronger so that we can make decisions in the face of uncertainty, because we come from a position of strength and a culture that makes us feel stronger and tools that make us feel stronger. So that's kind of a high-level way of talking about the people impact when we go through change. Anything you wanted to add there? There's a PDF on the right here that we'll be distributing to everybody on the line. But anything you wanted to add before we turn it over to Q&A, Aaron?
Well, yeah, it's just that these things don't happen on their own, and I think we led with that point that you have to build the muscle. There's entropy in the workplace. If you leave the workplace of its own devices, it will continue to degrade or it will trend towards chaos. It has to be actively managed. It has to be actively led. And these leadership principles, the lessons that I learned during my time were, it's just the innovation leadership principles are such an inclusive, empowering set of principles that it should be the way to do business, in my opinion. And in fact, any business that I do going forward, it's going to embody these same principles, and it's going to, I'll continue to use the muscle so that it doesn't atrophy. And but yeah, I'd love to hear what kind of questions that people might have.
Yeah, amen, brother. Innovation is a way of life now, not a function for one department. So let's ask Barbie. Barbie, what kind of questions are being typed in that we want to
Well, I want to invite the audience that there are two ways to ask questions. You can either use the question app in your control panel and type the question and I'll read it out for you. Or if you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you so you can ask Aaron and Raph directly. And I already have a question to get us started, which is for you, Aaron. What was your aha moment? What shifted for you to understand the importance of people and culture and the leverage?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we started, as Raph described, I wanted to be very process-oriented and just put pieces in place that would work, right? And one of the big structural changes we made very early on was to create a department called Insights and Innovation, which housed all of these various competencies that we were building. And I was tasked with leading that department. But like you also described, I was a leader that had very little awareness of how I should act as a leader. If I had a badge like you showed before, I had no empathy. Actually, in fact, I didn't know that I should have empathy. I just had no awareness that that was a thing that was valuable. And I thought that my department, this newly assembled set of pieces, would figure out how to be innovative on their own. And some time went by, and I was challenged by a coach of mine from Maddox Douglas to think about what kind of direction are the people in my department getting, and is that adequate direction to lead innovation in the organization? And for the first time, I kind of put myself in their shoes and realized that, oh crap, I'm the one who should be giving them space and some limited direction at the very least, if not just asking them questions about how they feel and what are they up against and what challenges are they facing. And for the first time, I think it was 6 months after the department started, I got everyone together and said, hey, let's actually talk about here what we're up against. And it was eye-opening. I did not know or understand or appreciate the headspace that people were in and the amount of change that they were trying to rationalize, and just how much they were struggling with that. So that to me was the big aha moment, was to actually sit down and start listening. I'd never done it before. And I had to build that muscle over time. I got better over time, I believe.
Well, that's all. And I'm going to ask you to build on that, the idea of, I remember Lori Lovins, Tina DeSalvo, Jocelyn DePetta, and a lot of that group, you know, would always say, you know, you want to change the culture, let's change the conversation. And you had, you know, those conversations you described. And if you would, tell the audience, tell the folks listening about the big conversations, the innovation cafes, where you opened it up very, you know, vulnerably to groups of 600 at a time as part of the bigger program. Tell the group about some of that.
Yeah, so that's what I was distracted by while my department was being formed. I was on the road talking to the broader organization, you know, this organization of 6,000 to 10,000 people, about the change that we were going to take on. What the conversation was, you know, what I thought it would be was, hey, we're going to innovate, give us all the great ideas around innovation that you as an employee base have. And I thought that was a very kind of valiant way to open up this innovation effort, was to say, give us your ideas. We want, you know, we'll open the suggestion box and you send all your ideas in. And when we went out to the people and said, we're going to be more innovative, tell me how we can become more innovative, their first reaction was to throw up all over me and to say, this is all the reasons why we cannot be innovative. And that in and of itself was a humbling lesson. And it changed the conversation. So for the first time, these people were being asked for their opinion, and they were daring enough to share the things that you pointed out, Raph, just a few slides ago. I don't feel comfortable sharing my opinion because this is what I'm rewarded to do. We are an operational company, and my reward is to churn through 25 of these pieces of paper every day and then call it a day. And if I do less than that, I get punished. And this is the type of stuff we would hear. And I did not expect that at all. But the exercise that Maddox Douglas and folks took us through that exercise, we were able to collect all of this feedback and assemble it into these big patterns of, you know, we were able to categorize what was the organization up against, what are the big themes that we need to take on. Like I said before, what are the highest leverage opportunities for us to change so that we can be more successful in the future? And if we went back later and asked the same question, hopefully we wouldn't hear the same things again. And that began the process, this iterative process of measuring, assessment, you know, some sort of action, but then being very careful to measure the impact and you know, what effect did our action have in the organization.
Yeah, and those big conversations were, we called them innovation cafes, modeled after world cafes. It's the idea of gathering hundreds of people at a time and replicating it in many different geographies, but so that the whole culture knows that everybody is having conversations like this, and it's rooted in the appreciative inquiry process. So it was definitely a co-created event. Axel, Maddox Douglas, Transamerica, I think the team together kind of combined heads and said, how are we going to facilitate this to go through that, what feels uncomfortable perhaps to many, that process of engaging in an uncomfortable conversation, like on purpose, so that we could get to a place where you were at the end of those sessions saying, okay, everybody, I heard you loud and clear, I heard what needs to change, and we're kind of getting aligned on where we're at and where we're going. It sure does sound, you know, tough according to the way, you know, you 600 people described it, but who wants to help, right?
That's
and
right.
Describe that moment.
Well, yeah, they had just for 4 hours gotten through griping and complaining for the first time in an open forum about everything that they disliked about our current environment, just the word cloud that we have. And when we asked for volunteers, I didn't expect anyone to raise their hand and say, yes, I want to be part of that. But kind of universally, at every site that we went to, when we asked for volunteers to help, we saw 20, 30, 40% of the hands raised. people who didn't know what they were signing up for, saying, you know what you're talking about is the aspirational company that I want to work for. And I recognize that we're not going to get there with just you sitting in the front of the room telling people how to behave. I want to be part of the change. And that was the turning point. Getting those people on board, getting them to understand where we are in a current state, where we're going, and having them be the evangelists and eventually the activators of what we were trying to do was so tremendously valuable. Eventually, they became the experts as well, and that was the goal, was to get the organization to be expert in what it is that we're trying to do, and that happened. And it wouldn't have happened, again, with 3 people trying to lead the charge and not asking for that help.
Yeah, you guys were great at building, formal and informal communities of practice throughout the organization and learning as you go what's working, what's not. It's different for every organization. It's different for different geographies. Really interesting. Barbie, I know we only have a few minutes left. Is there any question there that we think, 1 or 2, we can popcorn real fast to Aaron?
Yes, I think the question maybe to close would be what you would recommend to an organization that wants to engage in creating a culture of innovation.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's more of, in that case, a summary statement of what we just talked about. But that, it's a blend, of cultural work with all of the fun innovation work. And not to say that the cultural work's not fun, but it's very difficult. And the innovation work is the payoff. And so be prepared to have that mix of work. You want to get to the point where you have the investment dollars, you have the processes, you have the buy-in, the sponsorship, the space, the tools to succeed with innovation. But a lot of that requires inquiry. It requires, what are we doing well today? What are we not doing well today? And all of that culture training is what readies us for that shift in strategy that might happen, the shift in the industry landscape, the shift in regulation that you don't even know is coming. When that happens down the line, and we thought leaders change, right? And, everything that you know about the organization when you set out is likely to change and change very rapidly. And it's that muscle that you're building, that cultural muscle that you're building that allows you to readily adapt when that change happens. The only thing you can control is how you react to the situation, and being ready and having a team of people around you that's ready to respond to the charge. That's all you can do. The it will change, and the I will be what you can control. So just be ready for that. I didn't know that up front, but if I had, it would have been a very different journey.
Yeah, those are some powerful X-ray goggles to have, and to be sharing those with everybody on the line. So much appreciated, Aaron. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. Feel free to contact me. I know there's going to be plenty of stuff emailed out to the folks on the distribution list that registered. And in terms of, I think, the recorded video of this, an article kind of helping capture some of what we talked about, and some other resources as well. But don't hesitate to call, email. Let's keep talking. Let's keep training, building those muscles. The more of us that are ready, the farther we all get. Thanks, everybody. Aaron, thanks a ton.
Thank you, Raph. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Goodbye.